Welcome to the Emporia Public Schools podcast. I am your host, Dr. Allison Anderson Harder, Superintendent. This podcast is our way to provide students, staff, parents, and community members easy access to information on a variety of topics. Below the podcast link, there's a link to an electronic form for anyone to provide feedback or ideas about the podcast you may have just listened to, or to share ideas for future podcasts. Today we're talking with Ms. Patricia Saenz-Reyes, who is the district's migrant student and family resource specialist. Welcome, Patricia.
Good morning, Dr. Harder.
How are you?
Doing fantastic. Thank you so much for the special invitation to be on this podcast.
Absolutely. We are looking forward to hearing more about the services you provide for the district. So first of all, talk to us about what is Migrant Services.
Well, thank you for asking that because it is so important. I don't know that too many in our community or even in our state of Kansas know or understand exactly what migrant education is and what it stands for. Migrant education is actually a federal program and is handled and directed by our Kansas Department of Education. And they provide grant money to all educational agencies within our state. Also, this is a program that is not in existence just in Emporia, Kansas, or in the state of Kansas. It's actually in all 50 states. So this program is able to give us some grant money to help students who are migratory, whose parents have worked in agricultural positions or jobs. And when we think of agriculture, we often seem to think that it's the planting, seeding, picking of fruits and vegetables, which is not that far away from what we do in Kansas. Kansas is very well known for that. A lot of farming goes on here. But one of the things that we see a lot in our great state is that families also migrate to work in the processing. And here in Emporia, we have a very large one, which is Tyson Fresh Foods. So many of our families that migrate into the Emporia area might not have the opportunities to really work in the farming because many of our local farmers, they have been farming for many years. And for the most part, the family takes care of, the picking and the sitting and working on their farms and whatnot. So one of the big identifiers here in our community is those agricultural workers that move to the Emporia area to work at Tyson, for example.
Thank you. Talk to us a little bit about how students qualify for migrant services. So when they first enroll or maybe a student has been enrolled, maybe moved away and then come back, how do they qualify for these services?
So one of the beauties of my position is that I'm part of two very wonderful departments. My director for migrant education, who is Miss Judy Stanley, happens to oversee the teaching and learning department, but then I'm also under the umbrella of the communications department with the director, Mr. Lindell Langren. So being with that department directly is very beneficial for what I do because it gives me an opportunity to really meet every single family that is new to Emporia. And if they have any students that are 3 and 4 year olds or K through 12 that are having to enroll in one of our schools, it's the perfect opportunity for me to visit with them and help identify whether they qualify for our services or not. So in order to qualify for a program, the family has to have economic necessity by moving here. For the most part, when families do move, that's what's bringing them into our area. They're looking and seeking and getting work here. And so it's just making sure that in order to qualify for the program, that they are going to work in something that has to do with agriculture. And in this case, as we were talking earlier, it's working at Tyson Fresh Foods. Once they do let me know we're in the process of applying there or I have already started working there, then we are able to identify and we start by, the introduction, the visit, and then also completed what we call a COE, which is a certificate of eligibility. And because we're working with federal money and the federal program, this is very important because that application process goes directly to the state, and the state within days lets me know, yes, this family, based on the information provided, qualifies for migrant education services.
I'm really glad that you brought up the preschool age students because sometimes we think public education and we just think K-12. So I'm glad you brought up the 3 and 4 year olds.
Yes, and that is super important. One of the things that we don't realize when families are living the migrant lifestyle, and if I can add, just because I am of Hispanic descent, Mexican American, one of the big things that I see with a lot of our migrant families is that, those 3 and 4 year old families are often thinking, oh, well, they're too young to go into those 3 and 4 year old programs. We're going to wait until they're in kindergarten, not knowing how that affects the child when they actually go into kindergarten by not having those basic services, during the 3 and 4-year-old stage. So it's very important for us to ensure that those children are kindergarten ready.
This is a nice segue into talking about what services you provide that are available to students.
Goodness, when I often do presentations, Dr. Harder, my presentations are always in parentheses, because you can actually see the PowerPoint, and I always say, and not limited to, because the services are limitless or unlimited. It's just really based on the needs of each individual family and the student. But for the most part, one of the things that we have to ensure through the work that we do is that we have to make sure that students are at the same academic level as those students that have not had the mobility. And one of the examples that I often like to use, just so that people have a better perspective of what a migrant student or family, what their lifestyle looks like, is, those families that have experienced being in the military, if they haven't been in the military as a career, because we know that when you do a career, it could be 20 years. But if you're doing it to where you're renewing your contracts every so often, those contracts can be 4 years, 6 years maybe. And you often hear, the traumas that these children suffer and talk about and say what they left behind. Well, when you compare it to migrant education, and if you know anything about farming or working in the processing side, how often families move. Well, for example, with the crops, if anyone knows about that, to pick up a crop, it takes anywhere between 6 to 8 weeks. So when we have families following that kind of lifestyle and they're going from one city to another, or possibly from one state to another, they're moving every 8 weeks, and so as an adult, for myself, being originally from El Paso, Texas, moving here, it was hard to start in a new place. I cannot imagine for children to be moving every 8 weeks, what that does to them and growing up in that lifestyle. Because when you think about it, the social emotional piece of just leaving everything that you know behind from your school, that those people became family to you within that short span, even your teachers, your home. I can't even imagine it because I've never lived it to that extent. I always say that I am very fortunate to work on the processing side, because it truly gives me the opportunity to work with these families at a longer term. These families, if they decide to move to follow another processing plant within even the state of Kansas, because we have numerous plants here where, for example, Dodge City, Garden City, Ark City, or the panhandle of Kansas City, Missouri, and Nebraska. But it's super difficult. I can't imagine it. But these families, for the most part, they wait for breaks. They wait until there's like a winter break, spring break, or until the end of the school year. And so it gives us a better opportunity to really work with students and really focus on those needs, because those needs can be anywhere from being up to date with, the curriculum. Even though, most of our nation follows a specified curriculum, it could look different in every state, or it could look different from, one city to another, or from one state to another. And so just making sure that they're at the same level in their reading, their math. Also, we might have some English language learners. We're talking about families moving from one state to another, but Emporia, for example, right now is experiencing a large number of migrant families migrating from other countries. One of the things that I would like to share is, thankfully, I get the opportunity to meet families from all over the world. And some of the services that we provide right now, the demographics are Caucasian, African American, Asian, and our biggest demographic, of course, is Hispanic, because those are the families that we're seeing, especially from Central and South America. And so we are getting a large number of those students that are English language learners. And so that is a big piece that, often parents are concerned with, because they're like, how is my child going to progress in school if the language is a barrier? So that's what migrant education also comes in and provides additional assistance and resources to not just the student but also the parents, so that they can help navigate that process with their child.
So really providing that stability to the family and to the students so they know what to expect.
Exactly. And so on top of that, we like to add and incorporate the sense of ownership. in our community, and for the students a sense of ownership in their school, so that we can cover some of that social emotional piece.
Absolutely. Talk about what you do over the summer to provide services.
Great question, Dr. Harder. It's interesting because most people think that we only have like a 10-month contract, and I think you can attest to that. They're like, okay, what are you going to do for the summer? Well, they don't realize we're already starting, the planning for summer services. So one of the things that we have done for the last 5 years is that we have incorporated what we call STEM: science, technology, engineering, and math. And the reason we have done that is because before 5 years ago, we used to do home-based instruction. And with STEM, we have had the opportunity to create some very good partnerships with agencies throughout the state and now locally. We're very happy that for the last 2 years, I have created a partnership with our Lyon County K-State Extension Office. And so with Corrine Patterson and I, we are getting started to do our summer project. And a good way to introduce it to families and students, because students, when you oftentimes tell them, we're going to have summer services. They're like, oh, no, miss, I don't want to go to summer school. I want a vacation, right? So when we do that, it's like, hey, but we're going to do it with robotics. You're going to build things, every day. And when you do that, they don't realize that they're actually getting academic instruction in all those fields. Science, technology, engineering, and math, that they're actually reading, that they're actually having to do some comprehension, following instructions and putting things together because they're having so much fun. And so our plan is to have these services throughout the month of June with a focus on those early literacy, because even though I mentioned our program serves 3 and 4-year-olds, we actually start 0 to 5 to start getting them ready, even for that preschool piece. And so that will be with home visits where we will deliver some activity packets, some very beautiful books, so that families can start building on those libraries and start reading to their kiddos. And then after reading the book, putting the activity together so that they're hands-on. And throughout that packet, of course, the basic and most important is that reading comprehension and the language comprehension. But also when they're that young, we have to focus on those motor skills and those cognitive areas that need to be focused on to get them, kindergarten ready. And then the second week of June, we plan to have our kindergarten through 5th grades together in the same group. And oftentimes those 5th graders tend to become like the big brother, big sister of those little ones, which just works fantastic. And then we will work on the 3rd week with our 6th and 12th graders, because as we all know, and I have teenagers, that group needs a little bit more assistance because they think they're too big to be incorporated with the little ones. And of course, they're more advanced. So we want to keep them separate. And then on top of that, we will incorporate throughout those 3 weeks students that need to have some credit accrual to make sure that they're attending our learning center, because that's where the services for this piece is going to be conducted. And then our final week is just closing out, and we're still working on that. That's still work in progress on what our final week will be for summer services.
So a really busy summer, but a fun summer.
Yes.
Talk about the partnerships in the community that you've developed through Migrant Services.
Goodness, Dr. Harder, that is a good question, because the partnerships are limitless. I don't know that we could do what we do in our program without the partnerships. I just mentioned a minute ago, that students will be attending the Learning Center for, credit accrual during the summer. And I've been in this position for 13 years, and I love adult education. And so I see Migrant Services as an accordion, because, most families that are in the migrant lifestyle, when they come or they're moving, their mindset is so different. Their mindset is all about work, and not so much, what's happening. And it's not because education is not important, don't get me wrong. It is. It's very important. But especially when we're talking about families that are coming from another country. And once again, I'm going to use, the Hispanic piece of it, just because it's our largest demographic, and because myself, I experienced going to school in Mexico. It's different. It's different. But then when families come here and they have their mindset of working, and they're working hard, and if any, we all know that most of our local employment is long hours. We're looking 10 to 12 hours a day, and sometimes more than those 4 or 5 days a week. And so working is the main thing, is the priority. And a lot of our kids grow up in that mindset, and they want to get to a certain age where they want to work to help their family and even help themselves, right? And so working on that, with the Learning Center, we've created to where we focus on adults. So if they don't have their high school diploma, or if they need English language acquisition to navigate their work, their employment a lot better, and it's easier, then I start by working with the adults. And so trying to get them to take those classes with the Learning Center so that we can start changing mindsets and they can start seeing how important education is. Because I did not mention, but the mission of Migrant Education is to make sure that these students stay on track to graduate. And how do you do that? You start from the very top. And so we start with parents. And so, I'm so happy I've worked for the last 13 years with the Learning Center. And for the last 6 years, we have incorporated 2 on-site classrooms to help remove barriers. Right now, we are, of course, celebrating our 6th year with our 7th year, I believe, with Tyson Fresh Foods, where the actual class is there 4 days a week, midday, to accommodate those morning shifters and then the afternoon shifters. And then we have a second on-site classroom with Hopkins Manufacturing. Unfortunately, we haven't been able to go into other large corporations because of their hours. I mean, we're talking 10, 12-hour shifts. And I don't know that we have the staff to accommodate staff to be there at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. And then again, 7 or 8 o'clock at night. So that's work in progress, but talk about removing barriers. And so going back to other partnerships, those 0 to 5, I mentioned earlier how some of our parents just are not ready to let those 3 and 4-year-olds, go to school. They want to still keep them little, and they're still little, but they just don't want to see them grow too fast, I guess. So I have created a partnership with Leap into Health and Literacy, and that includes ESU's Leap program with Dr. Blocker, and then also with Mobilizing Literacy, Ms. Rhonda Beatty, and then with Ms. Penny Smith out at the Lyon County K-State Extension. And so with that program, it's a monthly event that we have, and our goal there is to, make sure that families leave knowing the importance of early literacy, fun activities with exercising, staying healthy, eating healthy on a budget, and then, of course, with myself, family engagement, and then providing that simultaneous translation that is just so important here in our community right now with the English language, barriers. On top of that, we have created Parent Cafe. And this cafe is in partnership with Communities in Schools, Ms. Roberta Schaefer out there, with Ms. Sarah Henning, who is our district liaison, and Ms. Jackie Lafuente with Emporia State University's TRIO programs, Talent Search. And so these monthly events are also to have discussions with parents that have students 9th through 12th grade to ensure that, they are up to date on just different topics and issues that their students might be going through. And I'll give examples, like at the beginning of the year, we started with presentations with the Tech College, talking about attending the Tech College for a technical, either certification or associate's degree. We talked about financial aid, because a lot of our parents just don't know how to navigate that, especially if they're coming from somewhere else. Just different topics. I mean, the topics get very serious. And this is a great opportunity for parents to listen to the presenters and also have conversations with other parents that might be going through those same issues. Okay, and so it has been great. And all these, this particular presentation is recorded and it's shared on our social media platforms. So because we understand that some of our families cannot attend that 12 to 1 time, so they have the opportunity to listen in. And I gotta say, Dr. Harder, we're very pleased with the number of, I guess I'm gonna call it the number of hits or views that we have on our social media platforms, because we can have anywhere from 400 to 500 views. So that just tells you our community is thirsty to learn, and to have this knowledge.
That is awesome. That's great.
Yes. And so one of the partnerships that I'm very, I'm going to show off, I guess, is the partnerships that we have with ESU. Okay, for years, we have had a good partnership with the admissions department, the financial aid department, the modern languages department, and most recently, for the last 2 years, with the Honors College program with Dr. Wyatt. he asked me to be part of his team in creating a Cesar Chavez event. And what started as a pilot program in 2022 now is going to be an annual event at ESU. And this year, we did it again, and it was this program, Cesar Chavez, is catered really to Hispanic students. And the reason we did that is because, we saw the need. We saw the need that Hispanic students needed something that they could call their own. And when we're talking about being inclusive and having, that sense of ownership, we felt that students and their families needed that. And it's just impressive, the number of students that attended last year for our first event, and then the number of students that attended this year. That just tells you how exciting it is for them to have the opportunity to have this kind of event. And I always compare, our Cesar Chavez, when I'm presenting the program or the event to families and students, it's like, this was a guy that not only was part of creating migrant education, that's why it's so close to my heart, but this is who was representing us at the same time that Martin Luther King was representing African Americans. So talk about a sense of ownership and a sense of pride. And so when they leave that event, it's amazing to see their little faces, how happy they are. And
they're inspired. They're excited, and they see hope for the future and what they could be doing in a few years.
Exactly. And so, for example, this morning I was at Emporia High School, and I had the opportunity to be part of the award ceremony today, and to see 237 high school seniors about to graduate here in the next few days. It's absolutely amazing. But my moment of pride was to see the number of Hispanic students, and a lot of those former migrant students and now current, seeing them graduate and the awards that they are receiving, the scholarships, and the careers that they are about to embark. I mean, anywhere from medical to psychology to engineering to, you name it. And as much as I love to cater to our Flint Hills Technical College here local in our Emporia State University, some of these students are aiming higher. They're going out of their comfort zone, out of their comfort area here to attend school outside of Emporia, and some even outside of the state.
Yeah, I was there too, and it was great to see all the students standing up and being honored, and the scholarships, and talking about where they're going. That is very exciting. I also want to mention too, it's May graduation, so Hopkins and Tyson, seeing the adults graduating with their diplomas, that is very, very exciting. So the work is paying off.
It really is. As a matter of fact, I just sent an email earlier this morning to Tyson Fresh Foods, and just trying to put together their ceremony that they do for their employees there, and getting that date put together. And now we're going to be working with Hopkins as well, and just seeing the happiness in these adults on what they have been able to achieve, not thinking that they would be here, achieving that goal as well. So that is huge. One of the things that we love about our adults and parents, right, because they are the parents of our traditional students, is that over the years we have experienced the celebration between husband and wife graduating together, mother and daughter, mother and son, father and daughter, father and son graduating together and walking that stage. That is huge.
So exciting, so exciting. Well, thank you for your work that you do, and thank you for joining us here today.
Well, thank you, Dr. Harder, for the invitation.
As we conclude this episode, we would like to remind our listeners that below the podcast link, there is a link to an electronic form for anyone to provide feedback or ideas about the podcast you may have just listened to, or to share ideas for future podcasts. We will end on our Emporia Public Schools mission statement. We engage, we empower, we inspire. Thank you for listening, and watch for upcoming episodes.